Imam Muhammad Al Jawad, peace be upon him. The Greatest Blessing. Written by Sheikh Fawzi Al Saif. Translated by Hassan Sadiq Jalal, with the help of AI. Reviewed and verified by Muhammad Hussein Al Butahi. Audiobook produced by Yasin Mazin Al Noor.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
Introduction. After completing the book Al Muhammad, Imam Ali bin Musa al-Ridha, and having performed Umrah in Mecca at the beginning of Jumada al-Thani 1443 AH, I was inspired to begin where I left off. Immersed in the hadiths and stories of Imam al-Ridha, accompanied by online libraries and my previous writings, lectures, and research about Imam Al Jawad, I wrote the first sentences of this book on the journey between Mecca, where the house of Allah lies, and Medina, on the high-speed Haramain train, intending to visit the Prophet and the infallibles of his household. Likewise, I aspire that our exploration into their life stories will revolve around the themes of monotheism and prophethood. Today is Saturday, the 10th of Rajab 1443 AH, coinciding with the birthday of Imam Muhammad Al Jawad. In the pages ahead, God willing, we will briefly overview some aspects of the Imam's life. While it is feasible to delve further into the remarkable life and biography of the Imam, constraints necessitate this book remain within its current limits without significant expansion. Otherwise, many topics still need to be addressed or sufficiently researched and covered. Upon seeking opinions, some believers suggested titling the book Bab al-Murad, the Gate of the Fulfillment of Wishes, as this name is widely recognized among the Shia of the Ahlul Bayt and is fitting for Imam Al Jawad, with Al Jawad being the only other title more renowned. However, upon seeing the title bestowed upon him by his father, Imam al-Ridha, as the Great Blessing, and the proclamation that no child with more blessings was born among our Shia, I found this title, despite its limited recognition, emanates from Alim al-Muhammad, the scholar of the Prophet's progeny, Imam al-Ridha, and is thus more comprehensive and complete. This recognition does not diminish the importance of the well-known name, Bab al-Murad, which holds greater recognition among the Shia of the Ahlul Bayt and their scholars and whose efficacy in realizing prayers and fulfilling needs is evident. By expanding on this blessing, it becomes apparent how it positively influenced the reinforcement of the beliefs of the believers and affirmed the leadership of the infallibles, beginning with his esteemed father, Imam al-Ridha, and extending through his progeny, from Imam al-Hadi to Imam al-Mahdi. Undoubtedly, the believers encounter circumstances similar to those witnessed during his time. As a result, his biography serves as a guiding light for believers in subsequent eras, with his blessings reaching into the era of his grandson, Imam al-Mahdi. We are not implying that the blessings of figures like Imam Al Jawad surpass those of the Prophet or Imam Ali. Rather, the magnitude of his blessings is relative when excluding exceptional individuals like the Prophet, Imam Ali, and other infallibles, who should be excluded from this comparison. In writing this book, we have focused on more engaging content for the younger generations. If the reader wishes for more detailed information, there are more comprehensive books, such as the Encyclopedia of Imam Muhammad Al Jawad and the Musnad of Imam Al Jawad, among others, listed in the sources. I ask Allah, glorified be He, to grant us success in completing this series, in which 6 books have been completed so far. I ask Allah to encompass my parents, my family, and all those who contributed to the success of this book, in His blessings. May He grant us the intercession of this great and generous Imam. Fawzi, son of the deceased Muhammad Taqi al-Saif. Chapter 1. Imam Al Jawad, from birth to martyrdom. The tidings of his birth. 1. Imam Al Jawad's birth was foretold through numerous announcements, some reaching back to the time of Prophet Muhammad over 2 centuries prior. While the birth of an individual from the Prophet's family is inherently significant, the exceptional anticipation and celebration surrounding the birth of Imam Al Jawad indicate that something extraordinary would follow. In a narration attributed to the Prophet Muhammad, a description of Imam Al Jawad was a blessed, pure, virtuous, pleasing, and contented seed named Muhammad ibn Ali. He is the intercessor for his Shia and will inherit the knowledge of his grandfathers. He bears a clear sign and is an evident proof. In the narration from Imam Musa bin Jafar, it was described that Imam Al Jawad would be born to Imam Al Rida as a trustworthy, protected, and blessed boy. 2. It is established that the blessed birth of Imam Al Jawad was delayed compared to the usual age of childbirth. Considering the birth year of his father, Imam Al Rida, which was in the year 148 AH, and the birth of Imam Al Jawad in the year 195 AH, it would mean that Imam Al Rida would have been 47 years old when Imam Al Jawad was born. This has multiple implications. It contradicts the claims of the Gulad, those who exaggerate the status of the Imams, who suggest that Allah has delegated everything to the Ahlul Bayt, including sustenance, giving, and preventing harm, and that they are independent in this regard. The delayed fatherhood of Imam Al Rida indicates otherwise, highlighting that they are indeed servants of Allah subject to His commands, even though they hold an exalted status as representatives of the Prophet and Allah's proofs to His creation. However, this does not detract from their status as honored and revered servants, subject to Allah's legislative and universal commands. In the greatest blessing Imam Muhammad Al Jawad fact, it showcases that despite their various trials and tests, they demonstrate patience and endurance and serve as role models for others facing challenges and trials. This serves as a test for people to believe in and submit to the statements of their infallible Imams. While many faithfully accept their Imam's words, others doubt the Imamate and deviate as a result. Some narrations, which align with historical accounts, suggest that Imam Al Jawad was the only child born to Imam Al Rida. Some factions, notably the Waqafa, exploit this information to cast doubt on the Imamate of Imam Al Rida. Their argument revolves around the claim that since Imam Al Rida had no offspring before Imam Al Jawad, he must be infertile, and thus, they argue that an Imam cannot be deficient. As such, the Waqafa used this idea to insinuate doubt and controversy by stating that he had no male or female offspring until then. 3. Historical accounts differ regarding the birth month of Imam Al Jawad, and this may seem trivial, especially as historians have disagreed on the births and martyrdoms of some of the infallibles. However, this case is different, as there are some implications, primarily as some historians associate one of the proposed dates with a renowned supplication recited by Shia Muslims in the month of Rajab. Thus, we must discuss this matter. Some of the Shia, including Sheikh al-Kalani, Sheikh al-Mufid, Sheikh al-Tusi, Sheikh al-Tabari, and al-Tabrisi, believe he was born in the blessed month of Ramadan in the year 195 AH. Some later scholars also agree. Others argue that he was born in the month of Rajab, supported by a well-known supplication attributed to Sheikh al-Tusi in Misbah al-Mujtahid, in which the blessings upon the Imam and his son are invoked. This supplication is part of the Amal, rituals, of Rajab and states. It is narrated from bin Ayash that Sheikh Abu al-Qasim al-Hussein bin Ru recited this supplication during the days of Rajab, after receiving it from al-Nahiyya al-Muqaddasa. The supplication read, O Allah, I ask you by the two born in Rajab, Muhammad son of Ali, the second, and his son Ali son of Muhammad, the pristine one. Sheikh Abdul Nabi al-Kazimi pointed this issue out. And in al-Kafi, it is narrated that he referring to Imam al-Hadi was born in Rajab. This is considered the more authentic view due to the well-known supplication mentioned earlier, found in books like Misbah al-Mujtahid, attributed to Sheikh al-Tusi. Due to this supplication, this viewpoint received popularity in Imami traditions, reinforcing the belief that both Imam Al Jawad and Imam al-Hadi were born in Rajab. While some scholars, such as Sheikh al-Kalani and al-Tabarsi, have pointed to a narration in which Imam al-Mahdi requested intercession through them during this month, the consensus among the followers of this supplication affirms that this is narration they were referring to, and thus their birth was in Rajab. The earlier mentioned scholars state that the reference to Rajab in the supplication does not indicate their actual birth month but rather a means of seeking intercession during this sacred time. The response that some provided suggests that Imam al-Mahdi sought intercession through them in Rajab, without them necessarily being born in that month, is considered an unsatisfactory answer. This interpretation contradicts the apparent meaning and lacks supporting evidence. The statement, "And in the narration of bin Ayash, he was born in Rajab," acknowledges the linkage between the supplication and their actual birth in Rajab. Thus, the interpretation that the Imam only sought their intercession during this sacred time goes against the apparent meaning, especially since no other evidence is presented to back it. Suppose someone argues that the narration claiming their birth in Rajab might not be authentic. In that case, we respond that there is no basis for doubting its authenticity given its widespread acceptance among the companions. Al-Kafami mentions, "Invalidating this narration would invalidate the supplication, and the consensus of the true sect affirms its authenticity. Therefore, there is no reason to question its authenticity after gaining such popularity among the followers." To summarize: 1. The view chosen by Al-Kulaini and the advocates the first opinion is an interpretation, fatwa, rather than a narrated account. Thus, it remains within the realm of scholarly judgment, ijtihad. 2. On the other hand, the second opinion is based on a narration transmitted by the same proponents of the first view. Moreover, even if they did not act upon it, their actions or lack thereof do not bind us to follow their opinion. 3. This narration is supported by its popularity and practical adherence among those who follow it, as evidenced by these scholars' regular recitation of the supplication and seeking intercession through Imam Al Jawad and Imam Al Hadi. Allama al-Majlisi, in al-Bihar, quotes the response of Sheikh al-Kafami, who opposed what was mentioned in the narration. Al-Majlisi states that, "In the margins of al-Balad al-Amin, Sheikh al-Kafami states after mentioning the narration by the Sheikh, meaning al-Kulaini, that some of our scholars did not further inquire about this narration. They present a question and answer by saying, if you say that Al-Jawad and Al-Hadi were not born in the month of Rajab, how does Imam al-Mahdi say, I ask you by the ones born in Rajab? I say, he intended to seek intercession through them this month, not because they were born in it. I say, that what he mentions here is not correct for the following reasons. A. Because the argument relies on the invalidity of bin Ayash's narration, which was mentioned by the Sheikh, meaning Al-Kulaini. B. The specification of seeking intercession through them in Rajab is a preference without basis had it not been for the birth of the Imams. C. If it were as they mentioned, he would have said the two Imams, and not the ones born. This is the end of his commentary. May Allah have mercy on him. Sayyid Muhammad Bakir al-Abtahi al-Isfahani says, regarding specifying the month of his birth, there are two transmitted views. One is reported from al-Askari, stating that he was born in Ramadan. The other, attributed to Sheikh Abu Qasim, al-Hussein bin Ru, which appears in a letter from Imam al-Mahdi, stating that his birth, Imam Al Jawad, and the birth of his son are in the month of Rajab. However, Al-Kulaini, Al-Mufid, Al-Shahid, and other historians support the first view. As you have observed, some scholars mention the narration of bin Ayash and did not criticize it except some who claimed that the name Muhammad bin Ali, the second, was a distortion of the first. They suggest that the intended person in the name Muhammad bin Ali was Imam al-Bakir. However, this contradicts the continuation of the supplication, which states, and his son Ali bin Muhammad, the pristine one. It is worth noting that there is no evidence restricting the name of al-Bakir to Muhammad bin Ali, the first, so consider this. I would argue, Sayyid Muhammad Bakir al-Isfahani's quote above is a response to Al-Alama al-Tustari, who followed the opinion that the word al-Thani, the second, is a distortion of the word al-Al, the first, in his book Al-Akbar al-Dakila. Sayyid al-Isfahani responded that he did not come across any restriction on the name of Imam al-Bakir to Muhammad bin Ali al-Al. Additionally, it contradicts the end of the supplication, which states, and his son Ali bin Muhammad, the pristine one. We can also dismiss the argument that there is a potential weakness in the narrator, bin Ayash, and that he may have confused details in his later years. Due to its practical significance within the Shia community, The mentioned supplication is not affected by an individual's confusion, especially in his last years. The wisdom behind the issuance of the supplication by Imam al-Mahdi appears to be a response to the Waqafa sect's denial of the fertility of Imam al-Ridho and the birth of Imam Al Jawad. This further supports the likelihood of the second opinion, which states that this blessed birth specifically took place in the month of Rajab. It is noteworthy that while the birth of Imam Ali is also in Rajab, it is not explicitly mentioned in the supplication. Therefore, we are of the opinion that the second explanation, which suggests that his blessed birth occurred in the month of Rajab, is more likely and plausible. 4. We notice that the birth of Imam Al Jawad is described as the blessed birth, and unparalleled in blessings for Shia. Some phrases and wordings in the narration draw our attention and require us to take a deeper look. Do these statements anticipating Imam Al Jawad's time suggest that his time will be of goodness and blessings, as interpreted by scholars like Al-Majlisi and others? Even if this were plausible, examining the historical and political context of Imam Al Jawad's era, particularly during the rule of the Abbasid Caliph Al-Mu'tasim and thereafter, questions the assumption that this period was an era of prosperity for the Shia, as envisioned by proponents of this interpretation. Future discussions which shed light on this matter, including the political climate during the reign of Al-Mu'tasim, will reveal the contrary. Additionally, the interpretation of blessings, as presented by Sayyid Abul Fadl Tabatabai, suggests that the birth of Imam Al Jawad and his young imamate confirms belief in the prophethood of Jesus and John the Apostle, who also became messengers of Allah at a young age. Conversely, a contrastive perspective emerges. Both Imam al-Ridho and Imam Al Jawad referred to the imamate of Al Jawad through the prophethood of Jesus and John the Apostle. This suggests that the belief in Imam Al Jawad's imamate was already established among the people without requiring additional proof through the connection with Jesus and John the Apostle. Thus, why would Imam Al Jawad's imamate need validation when the people already accepted it? Moreover, the use of expressions like the Shia and more blessed for our Shia in these narrations is noteworthy. It implies a focus on the Shia community, emphasizing the unique blessings for them, while the issue of Jesus and John the Apostle is more encompassing, extending to Muslims at large. Chapter 3. Our opinion on the Great Jawadi Blessing. We believe that the primary significance lies in the fact that the birth of Imam Al Jawad solidified the imamate of his father and dispelled the suspicions raised by the Waqafa. This movement was a malicious one that almost became destructive to the Imami Shia faith. We've pointed out some aspects of this movement in our book Al-Imam al-Muhammad. The danger of the Waqafa ideology is that it attracted a considerable number of significant figures among the Shia, especially from the associates of Imam Musa al-Kazim and his deputies. The core idea of the Waqafa was that the Imam must be the most complete individual, and, hence, cannot be lacking in any aspect. They argued that infertility and childlessness constituted a deficiency. And since Imam al-Ridha had not been blessed with a child until the age of 47, they built their entire argument on this point. By undermining this notion, the faulty foundation on which their argument lay crumbles. And despite Imam al-Ridha having confidently asserted that God would bless him with a child, those who opposed him continued to deny this, leading to an increasingly complex situation with the passing years. Naturally, the tactics of the Waqafa enabled them to affect some of the Shia of the Imam, and there was no solution except for the Imam to be a father. Thus, the birth of Imam Al Jawad shattered their arguments and invalidated their innovations. With his birth, that faction dissipated, and they could no longer argue. Thus, look at the blessing in this birth. There was no need for anything else. Notwithstanding this, his imamate also exhibited aspects of imamate comparable to figures like Jesus, John the Apostle, and others chosen by Allah at a young age. However, at this stage, nothing was required except his blessed birth, no words, actions, or miracles. The birth itself nullified their claims. And for the first time, we witness that the succeeding Imam affirms the imamate of the preceding Imam. The norm is for the preceding Imam to declare the following Imam, and affirm his imamate through explicit statements. However, in this case, it's different. Through the blessed birth of Imam Al Jawad, the Imam affirmed the imamate of his father, Imam Al Ridho, and undermined the allegations of the Waqafa regarding his infertility and his imamate. Perhaps this is why Imam Al Ridho described Imam Al Jawad as the greatest blessing upon the Shia of the Ahlul Bayt, stating that he is the child that no other child is greater in blessings for our Shia than he. Therefore, we believe that the statements of Imam Al Ridho regarding this blessed child are directed toward this aspect. 5. Just as his blessed birth occurred in such a magnificent manner, his imamate was equally significant. After its establishment and firmness, his imamate became an unequivocal response to any questions about the imam's young age. Consequently, the imamate of those who succeeded him, such as his son Imam Ali al-Had, who also assumed imamate at a young age, and his great-grandson Imam al-Mahdi, went unquestioned despite their young age. Notably, there hasn't been any controversy or doubt about the imamate of any imams who assumed leadership at a young age after Imam Al Jawad. If during the time of Al Jawad, the Waqafa and others attempted to cast doubt on his imamate, we don't find the same situation during the time of Imam Ali al-Hadi or of Imam al-Mahdi, indicating that the questioning of an imam assuming leadership at a young age had ceased entirely. This is among the blessings of the imamate of Al Jawad and its establishment among the people. Many scholars have noted this meaning regarding the statement of Imam Al Ridho we mentioned earlier. We believe that this matter was not achieved in a simple manner. The issue of someone assuming the leadership of the people, especially by the standards mentioned in Shia Imami sources, does not align with the Arab mentality, particularly if the one assuming this position is young. Thus, what was needed to be done to firmly establish this matter to the extent that it no longer raises questions afterwards? We believe that these efforts were made during the time of Imams Al Ridho and Al Jawad to solidify this matter in both theoretical and practical dimensions. Chapter 4. The Theoretical Dimension. It began during the time of Imam Al Ridho, through providing evidence that divine leadership, whether in the form of prophethood or imamate, is not bound by the people's standards or their closeness or distance to them. Instead, it is Allah's choice. And your Lord creates and chooses what He wills, not for them was the choice. This was illustrated by the fact that prophethood could be granted to a young child, while an elderly person may not attain it despite their worship. Allah bestowed prophethood upon Jesus and John the Apostle while they were still children. Solomon, too, received prophethood while he was young. In multiple narrations, the Imam indicated that Jesus, despite being sent with a new code of conduct, Sharia, was appointed a prophet as a child. In contrast, the Imams through their imamates served as a continuation of the message of their grandfather, the Prophet, and were not the bearers of a new code of conduct, Sharia. During this stage, Imam Al Ridho referenced the future imamate of his son Al Jawad, who was still a child. When the attendees expressed surprise, he referenced similar occurrences with the prophets Jesus and John the Apostle, peace be upon them. In the upcoming pages, we will delve into the analysis of young age and how it does not necessarily hinder elevated positions in knowledge, imamate, and the like. However, it may hinder societal acceptance, a norm for people, and this does not form a basis for rejection. Chapter 5. The Practical Dimension. Imam Al Jawad demonstrated this practical aspect by practicing his duties as an imam. His first task was to elucidate the Sharia and religious knowledge, affirming that he, like his noble forefathers, inherited and undertook its delivery. He answered every question with the correct response, not exceeding the boundaries set by his fathers and ancestors. Moreover, he provided clarity to issues that created confusion by pretentious scholars. This included his response to Yahya ben Aktham, the Abbasid judge, which will be detailed in the upcoming pages. Another illustration of this was him correcting the statements of Abdullah bin Musa al-Kazim when he sat at the forefront of a gathering, addressing questions, and implying he was the rightful imam after the martyrdom of his brother Ali bin Musa al-Ridha. This comes despite the established belief amongst the Imami Shia that imamate does not occur between two brothers after Hassan and Hussein. Thus, if Imam Al is an imam, his brother Abdullah cannot become an imam after him. Moreover, when he answered questions, his responses deviated from the principles of Imami jurisprudence and aligned more closely with the jurisprudence of the other schools. His unclear and conflicting answers caused sorrow among the Shia, that is, until Imam Muhammad Al Jawad, the son of Imam Al came forth to provide correct answers and clarify his uncle's errors. Details of this encounter and the issues discussed will be explained further in the book. His broad knowledge of Sharia sciences made his imamate, even at this young age, miraculous to both his Shia followers and others, resulting in all people acknowledging it. Even those who were initially surprised and accustomed to the leadership of elders eventually found reassurance in him. They realized that they were witnessing a miraculous phenomenon. 6. Imam Al preparing his son for imamate. Imam Al not only dispelled astonishment regarding Imam Al Jawad's early imamate but also went beyond by preparing him for the role, indicating towards him both privately and publicly and emphasizing his virtues and elevated status. He even went beyond this in the manner he interacted with his son, a fact that was markedly noted by the companions. Some, like Muhammad bin Abi Ibad, who would narrate hadith from Imam Al said that Al mentioned Muhammad Al Jawad only using his nickname, saying, "Abu Ja'far wrote to me, and I used to write to Abu Ja'far, while he was still a young child in Medina." He would address him with great respect, and Abu Ja'far's letters would come back in eloquence and excellence. I heard him say, "Abu Ja'far is my successor and caliph after me." This was the case even though he might have been 5 or 6 years old at that time. Al would write to Imam Al Jawad about the details of some issues, advising him on the generosity he should show, following the example of his forefathers. He emphasized not complying with what some officials and agents did, which was obscuring the blessings and goodness of the infallibles from the people. In a letter that Imam Al sent to Al Jawad, which Ahmad bin Muhammad bin Abi Nasr al-Bazanti reported having read, perhaps Imam Al intentionally showed it to him, it said, "O Abu Ja'far, I have been informed that when you ride out, they escort you out through the small gate. This is from their stinginess so that no one benefits from you. So I ask you, by my right upon you, that your entrance and exit should only be through the main gate." 7. Was he presented to the Kaffa? A narration reported by Sheikh Al-Kalani and Al-Kafi indicates that Imam Al faced skepticism from some of his Hashemite relatives regarding the lineage of his son, Muhammad Al Jawad, and suspected his fatherhood. It suggests that he resorted to proving this through Qiyafa and sought the testimony of the Khaif, and used this as evidence against those who denied that Al Jawad was his son. However, this cannot be accepted due to various problems in this narration, both in its chain of narration and its content, even though the narrator in Al-Kafi is Sheikh Al-Kalani. Since it has been occasionally propagated from the pulpits and might have been used by dissenters to criticize Shi'ism, we believe that it is best to challenge this narration after quoting it. The narrator said, "I heard Ali bin Ja'far narrating to Al-Hasan bin Al-Hussein bin Ali bin Al-Hussein, saying, 'By Allah, Allah granted victory to Al-Ridha.' Al-Hasan said, 'Indeed, by Allah, you have succeeded. His brothers wronged him.' Ali bin Ja'far replied, 'Indeed, by Allah, we, his relatives, also wronged him.' Al-Hasan asked him, 'By Allah, how did you all act, as I was not present among you?' He replied, 'His brothers and we said that there had never been an imam among us who had a dark complexion.' Al-Ridha responded saying, 'He is my son.' They replied, 'But the Messenger of Allah used to employ the Kaffa. So let the Kaffa judge between us.' He said, 'Send for them, as I won't, and don't let them know why you have invited them. Stay in your homes.' When they came, we sat in the farm. They lined up his relatives, brothers, and sisters. They took Al-Ridha and dressed him in a woolen cloak and robe. They placed a scarf around his neck and said, 'Enter the farm as if you are working in it.' Then they brought Abu Ja'far and said, 'Ascertain which of these individuals is this boy's father.' They said, 'His father is not present, but these are his father's uncles, and this is his paternal uncle, and this is his paternal aunt. And if his father is here, he must be the farm owner, as his feet and son's feet are the same. When Abu al-Hasan, Imam al-Ridha, returned, they said, "This is his father." Chapter 6. Our observations is as follows. 1. Regarding the chain of transmission, this narration is considered weak. Al-Majlisi described its chain as unknown, and Sayyid al-Sharidi gave the reasoning for this, stating that in the chain, there is Zakaria bin Yahya bin al-Numan al-Masri, who is not mentioned anywhere by the experts of narrators. 2. Concerning the central theme of the narration, which involves resorting to the kafa. We see that, according to Sheikh Murtada al-Ansari in Kitab al-Makasib, it is stated that kafa is prohibited. This was narrated by the companions and found in al-Hadaiq al-Nadira, by Sheikh Yusuf al-Barani. In Kifayat al-Usul, by Sheikh al-Akhound al-Khurasani, it is stated that there was no objection to the prohibition of kafa. Further in Muntaha al-Matlab, by Alama al-Hili, it stated that there is consensus on its prohibition. There are narrations condemning those who resort to the kafa and accept their judgment. In fact, Ayatollah al-Khoei declared it forbidden, stating, "How could reliance on the kafa be legitimate when there is consensus, amongst the scholars, in its prohibition?" As for what is narrated from the Prophet about relying on the kafa, it is not established but rather prohibited. It cannot be argued that this is out of necessity, as there is no evident need to prove anything to those who doubt through such an illicit manner, especially when this manner is explicitly prohibited. How could people falsely claim that Imam al-Ridha intended to utilize this means and normalize it in society, even though it is not permitted? Even if there were a necessity, he has both seen and unseen means at his disposal that would suffice without resorting to this. 3. The content of the narration itself raises various concerns as well. Thus, Ayatollah al-Khoei wholly rejected it. The first issue with this narration is that Ali bin Jafar al-Sadiq is reported to have said, "Indeed, by Allah, we, his relatives, also wronged him." This contradicts the well-known admirable conduct of Ali bin Jafar with his brother Musa bin Jafar, his nephew Imam al-Ridha, and Imam Al Jawad. His profound respect for the latter reached the extent where he would say, "I am his servant." The second issue is that the narration states, "They took al-Ridha and dressed him in a woolen cloak and robe. They placed a scarf around his neck and said to him, 'Enter the farm as if you are working in it.'" Does this befit the position and status of the Imam, where the Imam subjects himself to such an inappropriate situation so that someone might believe or disbelieve that Imam Al Jawad is his son? The third issue is what Sayyid al-Sharidi pointed out in Ayatollah Khoei's reports, where it mentions that when the kafa, came, they said, "These are his father's uncles, this is his paternal uncle, and this is his aunt." The apparent meaning is that the aunt had her face uncovered. Reflect on this, as it is not suitable for the women of the Ahlul Bayt, even if we were to consider the permissibility of unveiling the face or exposing hands to others. The fourth issue arises from the fact that the uncles of Al Jawad hold a position much higher than entertaining the notion that they could mistake him and be compelled to confront the Imam. If they perceive the Imam solely as a knowledgeable scholar of legal rulings, comparable to an adept jurist, then his skin color should not be a factor. However, if they recognized imamate as a divine position bestowed by Allah upon those with the highest knowledge, the elite of creation after the Prophet, distinguished by unparalleled moral virtues and beauty of character, then their denial of al-Ridha's statement that Al Jawad is his son, and their subsequent resorting to kafa, is contradictory. Fifthly, the claim that there had never been an imam among us who had a dark complexion is problematic. If they believed in the imamate of al-Ridha, as suggested by their saying, "There had never been an imam among us with a dark complexion," then his statement should have sufficed for them. Otherwise, their comments are accusing him of having an illegitimate son and slandering his wife with adultery, and we seek refuge in Allah from that. Thus, how could they be believers in the Imam and the Imamate? And if they didn't believe in Imamate, then how could they say, "There had never been an Imam among us"? Furthermore, this idea is inaccurate historically. Many authors have noted that some imams had dark complexions, and the Hashemites were known to have dark skin. As for the imams, it has been reported that Imam Ali, Imam Muhammad al-Bakir, Imam Jafar al-Sadiq, Imam Musa al-Kazim, and even Ali bin Musa al-Ridha were described as having dark skin. Thus, how then could they say, "There was no imam among us with a dark complexion"? 8. In a quick overview of the previous pages, it can be said that Imam Al Jawad was born in the year 195 AH after long anticipation from both his father, Ali bin Musa al-Ridha, and his followers, who firmly believed in the truthfulness of the statements made by Imam al-Ridha, which stated that God would bless him with a child, and this child be a blessing greater than any other for the Shia community. The explanation and definition of this blessing have been discussed in the previous pages. When the light of Al Jawad shone onto the world, Imam al-Ridha showered him with care and attention, in preparation for his assumption of the role of imamate. He consistently informed his companions and Shia that Al Jawad would lead the community after him, explicitly passing on the mantle. This guidance persisted for approximately 5 years, until the year 201 AH, when Imam al-Ridha was forced to travel to Tus by the Abbasid ruler al-Ma'mun against his will. This point was discussed in our previous book. Thus, he left his son Al Jawad, who at the time was 6, in Medina and corresponded with him through letters. Despite Al Jawad being a child, Imam al-Ridha expressed profound respect and honor for him in these writings, which included him calling him by his kunya, Abu Jafar, sharing them with his followers along with the responses he received. This period of communication and guidance laid the foundation for Al Jawad's future role as the Imam, and Imam al-Ridha emphasized the significance of his leadership to his companions and Shia. Imam al-Ridha was martyred in 203 AH, and at the age of just over 8, Imam Al Jawad succeeded him. This succession was explicitly stated in al-Ridha's communications, will, and frequent statements made in Medina and Khorasan. Further, through direct communication with his knowledgeable companions, Shurayh, and others, Imam al-Ridha communicated that his son will be the Imam. There are various narrations and indications supporting this, some of which have been mentioned earlier and some of which we will detail now. In one narration, Safwan bin Yahya asked Imam al-Ridha before he departed for Khorasan, expressing uncertainty about seeing him again and stating, "May we not see your day," meaning, the day of your passing. "If your passing were to happen, who would succeed you?" Imam al-Ridha pointed towards Abu Jafar, Imam Al Jawad, who was a toddler, indicating that he would be the one to follow. I further asked, "May I be sacrificed to you, this child who is only 3? He said, "And what is the harm in this? Indeed, Jesus was already a prophet of God when he was a 3-year-old. This story took place in Medina. Similarly, someone asked the Imam in Awaz, and he responded. In a narration from Jafar bin Muhammad al-Nafali, he said, "I met al-Ridha while he was near a bridge in Arabic. I greeted him, then sat down, and said, 'May I be sacrificed for you? There are people claiming that your father is still alive?' He replied, 'They lie, may Allah curse them.' I continued, 'What do you command me?' He said, 'Follow my son Muhammad after me.'" Similarly, in Khorasan, Muhammad bin Abi Ibad reports, Imam al-Ridha mentioned Muhammad, Al Jawad, only by his kunya, saying, "Abu Jafar wrote to me, and I used to write to Abu Jafar, while he was still a young child in Medina. He would address him with great respect, and Abu Jafar's letters would come back in eloquence and excellence. I heard him say that Abu Jafar is my successor and caliph after me." 9. Naturally, his imamate at such a young age, as he was only 9 years old, would result in questions and challenges regarding his leadership, as this had not been witnessed before in the history of the infallible imams. Therefore, individuals like Muhammad bin Jamhur al-Qami, Hassan bin Rashid, Ali bin Madrak, Ali bin Matsyar, and many others from various regions came to Medina to inquire about the successor after al-Ridha. The response they received was that the successor was in Syria, a village established by Musa bin Jafar al-Kazim, about 3 miles from Medina. When they arrived and entered the palace, they found many people sitting there and joined the crowd. Soon after, Abdullah bin Musa al-Kazim, who was an elderly man, came out, and the people said, "This is our leader." The jurists, amongst the crowd, commented, "We have narrations from Abu Ja'far and Abu Abdullah, Imams al-Bakir and al-Siddiq, that imamate does not take place between two brothers after al-Hassan and al-Hussein, and thus this man is not our leader." After further discussion in the gathering, it became apparent to those present that the information provided by Abdullah bin Musa, the uncle of Imam Al Jawad, who attempted to claim the imamate, lacked substance and did not align with the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt. Instead, what Muhammad Al Jawad responded with was consistent with what they had heard and known from his forefathers. This became the second evidence for his imamate among them, after following his father's directives and examining his, meaning Al Jawad's, statements and responses. Just as there was a gathering of Shia in Syria and Medina, a similar meeting took place in Baghdad in Barkazalzal, a town near Kark, at the house of Abdul Rahman bin al-Hajjaj. This gathering included prominent companions of Imam al-Kazim and Imam al-Ridha. In this gathering, the attendees discussed the plight of Shias and their leadership after the martyrdom of Imam al-Ridha. Among the attendees were Yunus bin Abdul Rahman bin al-Hajjaj, the host, Al-Rayyan bin al-Salt, Safwan bin Yahya, and Muhammad bin Hakim. The attendees debated issues, including addressing Imam Al Jawad's age, questioning how people would accept his young age, given their expectations from the previous Imams, especially given the position, authority, and infallibility associated with the imamate. The consensus was to turn towards Medina, especially since it was getting close to the Hajj season, assuming that the martyrdom of the Imam took place in Safar and that this meeting took place before Al-Ma'mun summoned Imam Al Jawad in the year 204 AH. Al-Tabari, the Shia Ithna Ashari scholar, reported this event in Dalail al-Imama in a slightly different narrative. When Al-Ridha passed away in the year 202, and Abu Ja'far, Imam Al Jawad, was around 6 years old, and people across various regions disagreed, Al-Rayyan bin al-Salt, Safwan bin Yahya, Muhammad bin Hakim, Abdul Rahman bin al-Hajjaj, Yunus bin Abdul Rahman, and a group of prominent individuals gathered in the house of Abdul Rahman bin al-Hajjaj in Barkazalzal. They wept and expressed grief over the calamity. Yunus said to them, "Stop weeping. Who will be responsible for issuing fatwas on matters of faith until this young boy," referring to Abu Ja'far, "grows up?" He, the Imam, was around 6 years old. Then Yunus said, "Who is with me in this?" Then Al-Rayyan bin al-Salt stood up and placed his hand on Yunus' mouth, and repeatedly slapped his face and hit his head. He said to Yunus, "O son of the adulteress, if this matter is from Allah, the mighty and majestic, then a 2-day-old can be like a 100-year-old. But if it is not from Allah, even if a person were to live to be 5,000 years, he would not achieve what the masters, the Imams, achieve, nor even compare to part of it. How is this something to be questioned?" The assembly quickly turned against Yunus, scolding him. Chapter 7. Is this narrative valid? Regardless of its chain of transmission, and whether we consider it mursal, a narration whose chain of narration or part of the narration does not reach the Imam directly, as seen by Ayatollah Khoei, or even if we say that it is part of a previously authenticated narrative. This chain is incomplete due to its weakness involving more than one narrator. Thus, there are several observations on this narrative. 1. Regarding historical facts, it incorrectly states that Imam al-Ridha's martyrdom occurred in 202 AH, while it took place in 203 AH. Consequently, the narrator made an error in stating the age of Imam Al Jawad, claiming he was 6 years old, whereas, according to the narration of Al-Wasiti, he was 9 years old at that time. This contradicts the precise historical details about the birth of Imam Al Jawad and the martyrdom of his father, Al-Ridha. 2. Yunus bin Abd al-Rahman holds a revered position, surpassing those present, including Rayyan bin al-Salt, in both esteem and knowledge of imamate. Given this, it seems implausible that he would be unaware that divinely chosen imamate is not necessarily tied to age. Ayatollah Khoei dismissed this narration as a known falsehood, as Yunus bin Abdul Rahman is a prominent figure trusted by the Shia. Thus, if he were to have said this amongst a gathering of Shia scholars, this doubt would have become known to all, especially among the Waqafa who were seeking opportunities to undermine imamate. 3. We also failed to comprehend Al-Rayyan bin al-Salt's stance based on this text, where he explicitly accused Yunus of being the son of the adulteress, which is a severe slander warranting punishment. We find it hard to believe that such language would come from Al-Rayyan, considering his esteemed status, especially when directed at Yunus, who also holds great stature. In any case, the way was paved for the imamate of Imam Al Jawad, although not as smoothly as his ancestors. Like his father, Al-Ridha's struggle with the Waqafa, Imam Al Jawad also faced challenges and skepticism from them and others. Approximately a year after the martyrdom of Imam Al-Ridha, in Safar 204 AH, Al-Ma'mun, the Abbasid Caliph, moved his caliphate back to Baghdad from Khorasan, and summoned Imam Al Jawad to Baghdad. During this period, Al-Ma'mun was attempting to quell his angered Abbasid family, mainly due to his involvement in the death of his brother, Al-Amin, whom the family favored. Ethnic tensions compounded the situation, with Al-Amin's court primarily consisting of Arabs, while Al-Ma'mun garnered support from Persians. Adding to the complexity, Al-Amin's mother was of Arab origin, whereas Al-Ma'mun's was Persian. Al-Ma'mun's announcement of Imam Al-Ridha being his crown prince further fueled resentment, as it signaled a potential power shift to the Hashemite Alawi family, the Abbasids' historical rivals, unless they reconsidered their positions. After the martyrdom of Imam Al-Ridha, Al-Ma'mun persisted in his strategic approach by bringing Imam Al Jawad closer to him with the aim of achieving multiple objectives. This mirrored his previous actions with Imam Al-Ridha, as detailed in our book on Imam Al-Ridha. It is assumed that Al-Ma'mun summoned Imam Al Jawad in the same year that he moved the capital of his caliphate back to Baghdad in 204 AH. The Abbasid family, who were staunch supporters of Al-Ma'mun's brother, Al-Amin, seized every opportunity to confront Al-Ma'mun, seeking to weaken him or extract additional concessions, as Al-Amin promised them. Thus, they vehemently opposed the approach of bringing Imam Al Jawad closer, stating that they couldn't believe that just when his father, Al-Ridha's situation was finally resolved, with his martyrdom, they were being confronted with his son, Muhammad Al Jawad. On the other hand, Al-Ma'mun benefited from aligning with the Imams to exert pressure on dissenting Abbasids. It was as if he was saying to them, "If you don't align with me, I will bring your enemies closer and empower them in the caliphate." He used a similar tactic when marrying one of his daughters to Imam Al-Ridha and appointing him as his crown prince until poisoning him. He repeated the act with Imam Al Jawad. When he married his other daughter, Al-Fadl, Zainab, to Imam Al Jawad. It is narrated that this marriage took place during the Imam's forced trip to Baghdad. The Abbasids opposed Al-Ma'mun move to bring Imam Muhammad Al Jawad closer to him, echoing their previous resistance to his father Al-Ridha's appointment as crown prince. However, their apprehension significantly escalated this time due to the heightened fear of the caliphate transferring to the Alawi household. Upon arriving in Baghdad as a 10-year-old boy in 204 AH, they pointed to Imam Al Jawad's young age, arguing that his age qualified him only as a child. They asserted that he should wait, mature, undergo religious studies, and then be considered for any substantial role. Seeking to prove his incompetence and unsuitability, they requested Yahya bin Aktham, the then chief judge, to test his knowledge in a gathering. This was done to demonstrate to Al-Ma'mun and the other statesmen the soundness of their position and provide them with a justification to advocate for the removal of the Imam from such a prominent position. It's believed that Al-Ma'mun was aware of the scholarly capabilities of Imam Al Jawad, which were akin to those of his forefathers. In fact, many Abbasid caliphs inwardly recognized the superiority of the Ahlul Bayt in knowledge compared to other scholars. However, Al-Ma'mun, it seems, was indifferent to who prevailed in the debate. He stood to benefit whether Yahya bin Aktham or Imam Al Jawad emerged victorious. The initial debate unfolded when Yahya bin Aktham queried Imam Muhammad Al Jawad on the permissibility of hunting prey during the month of Muharram. The Imam responded by meticulously dissecting the question into approximately 20 branches. Following this debate, Imam Al Jawad was married to Zainab, the daughter of Al-Ma'mun, also known as Al-Fadl. Historians have documented the marriage sermon delivered by Imam Al Jawad, and after its conclusion, Al-Ma'mun approved the marital contract, entrusting the Imam with the responsibility of marrying his daughter. The Imam, in turn, gave his consent. It is also possible that during this period, the second debate session was held, in which the Imam demonstrated the invalidity and questionable nature of some traditions attributed to the Prophet Muhammad. These attributed traditions sought to highlight the virtues of figures and symbols from the other schools of thought. The Imam meticulously and calmly discussed these traditions, which tended to cause tension and issues by their nature. In this debate, Yahya bin Akhtham posed the following questions to him in the presence of many scholars. 1. O son of the Messenger of Allah, what do you say about the narration that Gabriel descended upon the Prophet and said, O Muhammad, indeed Allah, the Mighty and Majestic, sends his greetings to you, and he says to you, ask Abu Bakr if he is pleased with me, for I am pleased with him. 2. Further, it has been narrated that the likeness of Abu Bakr and Umar on the earth is like the likeness of Gabriel and Michael, peace be upon them, in the heavens. 3. It has also been narrated that they are the leaders of the elders of the people of paradise. What is your opinion on this? 4. There is a narration that Umar bin al-Khattab is the lamp of the people of paradise. How do you comment on this? 5. It has been reported that tranquility speaks through the tongue of Umar. What is your perspective on this? 6. There is a narration where the Prophet said, if I were not sent, Umar would have been sent. What are your thoughts on this? 7. Additionally, it is narrated that the Prophet said, revelation has never been withheld from me, except that I thought it descended upon the family of Al-Khattab. How do you interpret this statement? 8. It is reported that the Prophet said, if punishment were to descend, none would have been saved from it except Umar. What is your understanding of this saying? We do not know whether these questions were agreed in advance between Yahya bin Akhtham, the judge, and Al-Ma'mun, or whether they were not. Nonetheless, these questions were obviously a potential minefield. If the Imam agreed with their content, even out of taqiyya, it would be spread everywhere that the Imam of the Shia and the leader of the Hashemite clan affirmed them and validated their content. And if he opposed them sharply or criticized their narrators or content aggressively, this would provide an easy way to incite people against him and rally them to stand against him. He would be accused of insulting the Caliph of the Prophet, Abu Bakr, and his friend, the Faruq Omar, making it easier to socially discredit him, or, in some extreme cases, even justify his killing. However, the Imam's calm and scholarly responses dismantled the bin Aktham's web of questions, nullifying his intended goals. Subsequent to these debates and following Al-Ma'mun's marriage arrangement with his daughter, it appears that Imam Al Jawad did not consummate the marriage. The marriage also seems to have not been conducted out of his complete willingness, but rather as a response to Al-Ma'mun's request. He did not want to appear to be contradicting the Caliph nor refusing to enter a family relationship with him. It remains unclear whether Al-Fadl, the daughter of Al-Ma'mun, wanted the marriage with the Imam or not. Later events, however, suggest that she may not have been interested. Moreover, the affluent and often frivolous environment she was accustomed to likely did not align with the environment of Imam Al Jawad. 10. After these events, Imam Al Jawad returned to Medina without his wife, the daughter of Al-Ma'mun. She would have to wait for several years until she was brought to him in Baghdad. From the end of the year 204 AH or perhaps 205 AH, after his return from Baghdad to Medina, until the year 214 AH, Medina would become the center of the Imam's scholarly and preaching activities. During the life of Imam Al Jawad, he had many encounters and faced varied reactions towards his leadership. Some outright opposed his imamate, others sought guidance, and some continued to be uncertain. The Imam dealt with each group according to their circumstances and intentions. We will address people's attitudes regarding his leadership in the coming chapters. due to his continuous residence in Medina and the widespread acceptance of Shia beliefs among the followers of Ahlul Bayt across the Islamic world, it became necessary to adopt a different style of correspondence to address various questions received from outside the city. These inquiries often came from pilgrims and visitors who came to perform Hajj and Umrah and pay respects at the Prophet's grave in Medina. This practice mirrors what we observed in the life of Imam Al. For more details, one can refer to Masu'at Makatib al-Aima. In the case of Imam Al Jawad, there are records of more than 60 diverse correspondences and letters, including those addressed to his representatives, responses to individuals mentioned by name, letters to his father Al-Ridha, and communications to his son Al-Hadi. These writings cover various subjects, reflecting the Imam's intellectual depth and versatility. Some scholars have entertained doubts that these correspondences could be construed as manipulation for taqiyya, concealment, and cannot be used as evidence of his views. However, the prevailing opinion asserts their legitimacy and draws similarities between written communications and verbal responses, arguing that if taqiyya were to be exercised whether in verbal or written communications, specific evidence and justifications would be required. Thus, renowned scholars consistently rely on the correspondences as evidence after ensuring that there is no evidence of anything that warrants action by taqiyya. What do we generally benefit from these correspondences? These correspondences provide valuable insights into the widespread acceptance of Shi'ism in different parts of the Islamic world. In fact, some rulers and officials may have been Shia, even though the infallibles did not explicitly guide them in that direction, as was done in the case of bin Yaqtin and some of his colleagues. Nonetheless, many gave allegiance to the Imams. In one case narrated by Sheikh Al-Kulaini, a man from Afghanistan sought the Imam's intercession with a local governor in his area, and the Imam granted him that intercession. Additionally, gifts and delegations from Shia communities in places like Tarsus, in the Levant, arrived to Kairan al-Qazim, who served as an agent for the Imam in Baghdad. Kairan then directed these gifts to the Imam. As for Qom, Awaz, and the mountainous regions, it is evident that Shi'ism had spread there, as indicated by the presence of his representatives there. This is in addition to cities like Baghdad, Kufa, Basra, Hamadan, and Ray. As such, it was necessary for the Imam to adopt the system of representation, Wakala, and his representatives and deputies became widespread throughout the Islamic lands. His representatives and deputies across the world. Despite having provided a brief overview of some of his companions in our book Rijal Ahlul Bayt, Volume 2, and alluded to their roles, as well as in the system of religious administration among Imami Shiites, which covers the roles and actions of agents, we will also mention some of the representatives and deputies of here. Amongst them was Ibrahim bin Muhammad al-Hamdani, who was entrusted with the Hamadan territory after the death of Yahya bin Abi Imran al-Hamdani. Imam Al Jawad wrote a letter to Ibrahim and instructed him not to open it until after Yahya's death. The letter remained with him for 2 or more years until Yahya died. At that point, Ibrahim opened the letter, and to his surprise, the Imam instructed him to assume the position of Yahya and carry out the same responsibilities. The Imam informed all the agents to obey his orders and not oppose him. The Imam also praised him in all his letters. Among them was also Kairan al-Qazim, who appears to have been his representative in Baghdad. Gifts were sent to him from Tarsus in the Levant, and he sent a letter to Imam Al Jawad seeking his guidance. Another notable representative is Zakaria bin Adam al-Qumi, who served as the Imam's representative in Qom and its outskirts. He held a high status, and the Imam frequently mentioned him and expressed his sadness after he passed away on various occasions. Abu Talib al-Qumi narrates, I visited Abu Ja'far II, meaning Imam Al Jawad, in the latter part of his life, and I heard him say, May Allah reward Safwan bin Yahya, Muhammad bin Sinan, Zakaria bin Adam, and Sa'd bin Sa'd, as they have been loyal to me. Zakaria bin Adam was one of those appointed by him. The Imam also said, I have remembered Allah's will in the deceased man, meaning Zakaria's death. May Allah, the Exalted, have mercy on him, on the day he was born, on the day he died, and on the day he will be resurrected. He lived his days acknowledging the truth, patient and steadfast, accountable to what is due to Allah and His Messenger. May Allah have mercy on him. He remained unwavering and steadfast. May Allah grant him reward of his intentions, recompense for his efforts. 11. Did Al-Ma'mun pass by him while he was playing in the street? Bin Shar-Ashub, 588 AH, conveyed in Al-Manakib, and it seems he was the first to mention it, as we haven't found it in any book before him, and those who came after attributed it to him and relied on him for it, a narration indicating a meeting between the Imam with Al-Ma'mun in Baghdad. According to the narration, Imam Al Jawad was among some boys in the street, but when Al-Ma'mun passed by, the other boys ran away, while Imam Al Jawad remained. When Al-Ma'mun returned from hunting, he found them still there. Then Al-Ma'mun posed some questions for Imam Al Jawad, who answered them in a manner that astonished Al-Ma'mun. The text that Bin Shar-Ashub conveyed is as follows. One day, Al-Ma'mun passed by the son of Al-Ridha while he was with some young children. When the children saw Al-Ma'mun in his procession, they ran away for fear of him, except Imam Al Jawad. When Al-Ma'mun saw him, he stopped and said, "Why did you not run away?" Imam Al Jawad replied, "I am not guilty for me to be afraid of you, nor is the path narrow so that I should make way for you." Al-Ma'mun asked, "Who are you?" He said, "Muhammad bin Ali, bin Musa bin Ja'far bin Muhammad, bin Ali bin al-Hussein, bin Ali bin Abi Talib." So Al-Ma'mun replied, "What knowledge do you possess?" He said, "Ask me about the news of the heavens." After bidding him farewell, Al-Ma'mun continued with his falcon for hunting. When he moved away from him, the falcon began flapping its wings. Al-Ma'mun looked to his right and left but did not see any prey. The falcon continued to flap his wings, so Al-Ma'mun let him fly. The falcon soared, disappearing into the horizon and away from his sight for a while. Afterwards, it returned to him carrying a small green snake, so he took the snake, placed its snake in the bait house and said to his companions, "I was close to killing that boy today." Then he returned, and the son of Al-Ridha was among the group of young boys and said, "What knowledge of the heavens do you possess?" So he said, "Yes, O Commander of the Faithful. My father narrated to me from his forefathers, from the Prophet, from Gabriel, from Allah, that he said, between the heaven and the air is a tumultuous sea which contains green snakes with spotted bellies. Kings hunt these snakes with their fierce falcons so that scholars could be tested with them." So Al-Ma'mun said, "You have spoken the truth, and so did your forefathers, and so did your grandfather, and so did your Lord." Then he mounted the boy on the horse and married him to Al-Fadl. Bin Talha al-Shafi'i narrated this incident in his book, Matalib al-Sa'il, which was written approximately 64 years after Bin Shar-Ashub. However, he made modifications, changes, and additions to the narrative. As for the changes, he changed the following section. He asked him about the affairs of the heavens, and the Imam narrated to him from his forefathers, from Gabriel, from the Lord of the worlds, the existence of the tumultuous sea between the sky and the air, in which there are green snakes. All of this was summarized by him saying, "So Allah inspired him to say, O Commander of the Faithful, indeed Allah, the Almighty, created by His will, in the sea of His power, small fish that kings and caliphs hunt with falcons to test the lineage of the people of prophethood." In terms of additions, the narration of Bin Talha mentions that this interaction took place in Baghdad when the Imam was 11 years old. Bin Sabag al-Maliki narrated this story from Bin Talha al-Shafi'i in his book Al-Fusul al-Muhimma. However, in his narration, he changed the age of the Imam to 9 years old. Following this period, this incident spread widely in the writings of both Shia and Sunni scholars, appearing in numerous books discussing the life and virtues of Imam Al Jawad. Each author presented this story with a different variation, addition, or omission to reflect their individual worldview. Some objections have been made on the different retellings, and Sheikh Al-Qurani has pointed to some of them, although he did not see that these objections lead to a clear answer. The first objection is what Sheikh Al-Qurani indicates in his book Al-Imam Muhammad Al Jawad by saying, "These narrations are mursal, a narration whose chain is interrupted, and because it is so, we must look into it. However, it does not require a response. And we say this is true if the issue was only this. However, if it even contradicts historical or doctrinal facts, then there is no objection to entirely rejecting it. Notably, the incident has no chain of transmission, sanad, through the Imami, Shur'ah, path or any other path, regardless of the degree of reliability of that chain. The second objection that Al-Qurani states is that this narration is countered by the fact that it implies that Al-Ma'mun did not know Imam Al Jawad, despite, historically, knowing him well. In fact, Al-Ma'mun stated that his daughter was to be wed to Al Jawad during the Imam's childhood and during the life of Imam Al-Ridha. He then brought the Imam to Baghdad and challenged the Abbasids with him while organizing a historical marriage ceremony. To this, I say that this is a valid and plausible objection. The third point he mentions is that this narration is countered by stating that the Imam was playing with boys, yet an infallible does not play or engage in frivolous activities. I believe that this is considered a well-established fact in the Imami tradition. Imam Al Jawad himself was displeased with Ali bin Hassan al-Wasiti, who stated, "I brought with me some playthings for boys made of silver, and I said that I will present these to my master Abu Ja'far." When the people dispersed from him after he answered everyone's questions, he stood up and went to a watering place. I followed him, and I met him near a resting area. I said, "I seek permission for me to enter, O Abu Ja'far." I then entered and greeted him, and he returned the greeting with a disapproving look on his face. He did not instruct me to sit. I approached him and emptied what was in my pocket before him. He gave me an angry glance, then gestured with his right and left hands and said, "Did Allah create me for this, to play?" So, I asked for his forgiveness, and he pardoned me. It is remarkable that he, Sheikh Al-Qurani, may Allah protect him, did not see such a doctrinal deviation concerning imamate as sufficient to outright refute this narration. Efforts by some to correct the details of the incident by proposing that the Imam was not playing but waiting on the road, expecting to meet Al-Ma'mun, do not resolve the narrative's issues. This stance fails to address Al-Ma'mun's supposed lack of awareness of the Imam, and does not address the fact that the Imam was in Baghdad only after being summoned by Al-Ma'mun. Thus, why would the Imam need to wait for a chance encounter on the road when Al-Ma'mun goes out for hunting? The fourth objection is that the context of the incident, as per bin Shar-Ashub's account and bin Talha's statement, indicates that the incident took place in Baghdad. However, Imam Al Jawad did not come to Baghdad until after his father's martyrdom and his assumption of the imamate. He was brought by Al-Ma'mun. Does it make sense, given this context, for him to be in the street with the children? Whether he was playing with them or watching them, as some have attempted to portray the incident. Moreover, various narrations impose different timelines, suggesting that Al-Ma'mun went hunting and returned, and the children, along with Imam Al Jawad, were still playing in the street. Considering the time it takes to go hunting and return, how plausible is it that the children and the Imam, either standing or playing, are still in the street? Attempts to rectify the situation by suggesting that the incident might have occurred in Medina because the young Imam Al Jawad did not reside in Baghdad are also unsuccessful. This is because no historical record indicates that Al-Ma'mun had gone to Medina for hunting and met Imam Al Jawad during that period. The fifth point of contention lies in the description given by Al-Ma'mun to Imam Al Jawad in the mentioned narration. Initially, Al-Ma'mun does not recognize him, only inquiring about his name. Then, suddenly, he exclaims that the boy's death is imminent. Subsequently, he proceeds to ask the Imam about the affairs of the heavens. When the Imam informs Al-Ma'mun about the existence of the tumultuous sea between the sky and the air, containing green snakes with spotted backs, Al-Ma'mun accepts this information without questioning or seeking further evidence. In this narrative, it seems as if Al-Ma'mun is portrayed as someone from the Imamiyya who unquestioningly accepts what their Imam says without a shred of doubt. The sixth point of contention revolves around the omission of the mention of the tumultuous sea in the narration by the esteemed scholar Sheikh Abbas al-Qumi. May Allah have mercy on him. Although it is initially present in bin Shar-Ashub's narration, the Sheikh, in his approach, diverges from this methodology despite his typical adherence to the accounts of historical narrators, as he had Akbari leanings. Thus, it remains perplexing why he chose to disregard the tumultuous sea in bin Shar Ashub's narrative and replace it with information found in the other school's sources. It is possible, and Allah knows best, that he did not believe in the tumultuous sea mentioned in the narration. The attempt by Sheikh al-Qurani, may Allah protect him, to interpret what bin Shar Ashub narrated by saying, "As for the hunting of the falcon for fish, whether alive or dead, from the air, there is an explanation. The explanation is that some storms can carry water and fish from the sea and throw it hundreds of kilometers away. I have read this in historical sources, and they have filmed it in our time. Is not entirely convincing either. This is because the narration does not speak of the presence of fish in the air or on land, rather, it emphasizes the existence of a sea with green snakes. The only narration that mentions fish is the one by bin Talha. Otherwise, bin Shar Ashub's narration does not mention fish." Perhaps Sheikh al-Qurani noticed that defending the mentioned narration is challenging. Thus, he suggested that the narrator might not have mastered narrating the incident accurately or may have exaggerated the retelling. He said, "It could be that Al-Ma'mun asked Imam Al Jawad about a strange incident that happened to him during hunting. The Imam then informed him about the possibility of seawater and fish being in the sky at times. It could thus be considered a karama, spiritual gift, for the Imam that he knew exactly what happened to Al-Ma'mun and explained it to him. However, the narrator did not master narrating the incident, or he added to it. However, we believe that the flaws, or rather the gaps, in this narration are more numerous and challenging than to patch it up adequately. All this explanation is given despite the fact that the first part of the incident is narrated in a different manner in the Sunni school of thought. Interestingly, in another narrated account, Caliph Umar passed by playing children, and they ran away in fear, except for Abdullah bin Zubair. When Umar asked him about the reason for not fleeing like the others, he replied that the road was not narrow and that he had committed no wrongdoing. Is it then not strange that the same incident with the same dialogue appears in two different contexts within the span of approximately 190 years? Therefore, I ask, which of them influenced the other? Attitudes toward the Imamate of Al Jawad. It should be noted that the divine succession of Imamate to Imam Muhammad Al Jawad, following his father Ali bin Musa al-Reza, is very unique. It marked the first instance in the history of Imamate, spanning from the time after the demise of Prophet Muhammad until the year 203 AH, roughly 2 centuries, where an Imam took on the position of Imamate at the remarkably young age of 8, during his initial assumption of the Imamate. This situation led to varied stances among people and authorities regarding the acceptance and belief in his Imamate. Regarding the Abbasid authority, they not only refused to acknowledge Imam Al Jawad's Imamate but also denied the Imamate of his forefathers despite recognizing the scholarly virtues of the preceding Imams and their social leadership among the Bani Hashim and the Shia community. Their interaction with them was limited to acknowledging their roles as scholars and social leaders to that extent. However, even within these boundaries, the Abbasid authority did not concede the right to Imam Al Jawad. Except for Al-Ma'mun, whose stance will be elaborated shortly, the core leadership of the Abbasid household refused to recognize the scholarly prowess of Imam Al Jawad. Instead, they viewed him as any other child who should undergo education and study under the guidance of senior scholars until reaching maturity before he could be treated on par with other scholars. Consequently, they protested when Al-Ma'mun sought to marry his daughter to Imam Al Jawad, arguing that he was too young and needed to mature. When Al-Ma'mun rejected their criticism, they resorted to testing the Imam through the well-known story involving Yahya bin Aktham. Even though the Imam surpassed Yahya bin Aktham in answering his questions and left Yahya unable to respond to his inquiries, this was not sufficient for them to acknowledge the Imam. How could they, when they had not accepted his father, Imam al-Reza, despite the manifestation of his virtues and miracles over a long period of time? The reason for this, perhaps, is what Al-Ma'mun himself expressed, if the attribution of the statement to him is accurate. He told them, "You are the cause of it. Had you treated them, The Ahlul Bayt, justly, it would have been more appropriate for you. As for what those before me did, they were cutting familial ties. However, what perplexes some is Al-Ma'mun's stance towards the Imam. On the one hand, he engages in scholarly discourse about Shurism, debates with the other school's scholars on the merits of Ali bin Abi Talib, saying that he is the best after the Prophet, and acknowledges, theoretically, the unique attributes that Allah has granted to the Ahlul Bayt. On the other hand, we find him ordering the poisoning of Imam al-Reza. Had it not been for Imam al-Reza informing him that his, Al-Ma'mun's, death and the death of Imam Al Jawad were close and simultaneous, likening it to the distance between two fingers, he might have even expedited the assassination of Imam Al Jawad. Sheikh Al-Qurani expands on this matter in his book Imam Muhammad Al Jawad as follows. 1. Al-Ma'mun's behavior falls within the political conflict within the Abbasid family, and thus, Al-Ma'mun uses it as a political tool to pressure them, conveying the message that if they don't unite around him, the caliphate will slip away from their grasp. 2. From an intellectual perspective, Sheikh Al-Qurani believes that Al-Ma'mun was inclined towards establishing an Abbasid regime with an Alawite Shiite ideology. He sees that Al-Ma'mun took practical steps in this direction, such as writing a proclamation disassociating from Muawiyah. However, Al-Ma'mun refrained from publicly declaring it, fearing public resentment. This proclamation remained hidden until it was revealed by the Abbasid ruler Al-Mu'tasim. 3. Ultimately, Al-Ma'mun's stance can be summarized as being theoretically Shia while practically acting as an adversary to the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt and their followers. The worst stance was that of Al-Mu'tasim, the Abbasid ruler who succeeded his brother Al-Ma'mun in the caliphate. Driven by inherent ignorance and disdain for scholarly knowledge, as will be further discussed in the biography of Imam Ali al-Hadi, who lived through this period most extensively, Imam Al Jawad's superior knowledge held no significance for him. Additionally, Al-Mu'tasim's military upbringing, as noted by historians, shaped his perspective, and thus, he lacked any form of diplomacy or cordial mannerism in his interaction with Imam Al Jawad. Given his classification of the Imam as one of his enemies, and rivals for his rule and family, Al-Mu'tasim adopted extreme positions towards the Imam that ultimately led to his assassination. As for the ministers of the state and its institutions, they were inclined towards the ruler or caliph, exhibiting varying degrees of leniency or strictness in their alignment with the ruler. As for the general Muslim population outside the Shia community, there seems to be minimal interest in the case of Imam Al Jawad's succession and assumption of imamate at such a young age. This is apart from some scholars and jurists associated with the state, who, being part of its agenda, naturally have positions that may be influenced by their official roles. Therefore, some of them, whether willingly or not, engaged in attempts to pose challenging questions to the Imam, possibly as a means of testing him. As for the general population, they were detached from this issue early on, following the Umayyads' normalization of the notion that the Imam and the ruler are synonymous, regardless of individual capabilities and qualifications. In this view, the Imam is the one who holds religious authority, while the ruler, or Wali al-Amr, is the political authority. And even if there are disagreements among multiple contenders, the Caliph and Wali al-Amr are seen as the decisive victor who settles the dispute and delivers the Friday sermon. Therefore, they did not inquire about the signs, qualifications, or capabilities of the Imam, especially since all of this can be manufactured through media, Friday sermons, and the like. Hence, and God knows best, individuals among the public did not see themselves as greatly concerned with searching for the true Imam or his signs. Their Imam is well known, the one who has political authority. Regarding the Shia of the Ahlul Bayt, we can observe the following stances. Firstly, the stance of the believers in the imamate of Al Jawad, who relied on the premise that imamate is divine and akin to prophethood. Thus, it is not necessarily subject to human contestation. Just as it is possible for God to send a prophet at a young age, it is also conceivable for imams to assume their role at a similar age. What may seem unlikely at first glance is merely due to the lack of familiarity, not because it is inherently impossible or prohibited. This lack of familiarity can be overcome with the initial occurrence, whether it pertains to the first prophet or the first imam. As it becomes a recurring pattern, any reservations or apprehensions would gradually dissipate, especially considering the affirmation of previous imams that such a situation would indeed occur and serve as a test for the people. This stance is notably exemplified by Ali bin Jafar al-Sadiq, who, despite his esteemed knowledge, noble lineage, and prominent position among the Shia, openly acknowledged and affirmed the imamate of Imam Al Jawad and submitted to him. This is remarkable, given that Imam Al Jawad was approximately 47 years younger than Ali bin Jafar, and he was the uncle of his father, Imam Al Reza. In a narration by Muhammad bin Hassan bin Ammar, he states, "I was with Ali bin Jafar bin Muhammad in Medina, and I had stayed with him for 2 years, writing down what has been heard from his brother, Al-Qasim. One day, Abu Jafar Muhammad bin Ali al-Reza entered the Prophet's mosque, and Ali bin Jafar stood up barefoot and without a cloak and kissed his hand and his forehead. Abu Jafar said to him, 'O uncle, sit down, may Allah have mercy on you.' Ali bin Jafar replied, 'O my master, how can I sit while you are standing?' When Ali bin Jafar returned to his gathering, his companions criticized him, saying, 'You are his uncle, and yet you treat him in this manner?' Ali bin Jafar responded, 'Silence. If Allah, the Almighty, and he seized his beard, saw this grey beard unfitting and saw this young man and placed him in the position that he is in, who am I to deny his superiority? We seek refuge in Allah from what you are saying. Rather, I am his servant.' This was not an isolated incident, as it occurred amongst others as well. It was indeed striking that a person in his mid-50s, with all his virtue and prestige, would kiss the hand of a 9-year-old boy and even put on his shoes, as mentioned in other narrations. It is likely that he deliberately did this to demonstrate the elevated position and greatness of Imam Al Jawad in the eyes of all Shia. It appears that the acceptance and belief in the imamate of Al Jawad was widespread among the Shia community. Although some might not express it as explicitly as the scholar Ali bin Jafar al-Sadiq, as mentioned earlier, the eventual recognition of the Imam after a short period following his father Al-Reza's martyrdom indicates this reality. Additionally, the fact that his father's most significant companions were his companions and narrators underscores this point. This, of course, excludes the Waqafa, who will be mentioned. Secondly, those who denied or attempted to conceal his imamate. There was a minority known as the Waqafa who insisted on not acknowledging and believing in the imamate of Imam al-Reza. Since the textual evidence for al-Jawad's appointment comes from his father al-Reza, and since they did not believe in him, they naturally dismissed the imamate of Imam Al Jawad as well. Fairness required that they reconsider their claims if their doubts could be dismissed. Instead, they insisted that Imam Al Reza, due to not having offspring, was infertile, and therefore, he could not be an imam because an imam should not have any deficiency. The fair course would have been for them to reconsider this position in light of the birth of Imam Al Jawad and repent for their assertions. However, they placed their fingers in their ears, covered themselves with their garments, persisted in arrogance, and obstinately clung to their position. This is in addition to the knowledge that emerged from Imam Al Jawad, which was comparable to his infallible forefathers. Moreover, some of the Waqafa who acknowledged the imamate of Ahmad bin Musa, the brother of Imam al-Reza, should have reverted to the Imam al-Reza after Ahmad bin Musa himself, along with his mother Ahmad, returned to the house of Imam al-Reza and declared that he, along with all those who had pledged allegiance to him, were in allegiance to his brother, al-Reza. However, despite this, the Waqafa did not follow their supposed leader's actions. Thirdly, we may find among these two groups another group. This group included some individuals who had moments of hesitation, questioning, or contemplation regarding the imamate of Imam Al Jawad, but they soon settled in their belief after seeing certainty, and some may say that they can be excused. Certain preconceptions, such as questioning how God can grant imamate to a child or how can such a child attain divine knowledge, might have led some to hesitate in embracing imamate. However, with some reflection, consideration, observing the divine knowledge attributed to him, and witnessing practical miracles, they came to realize that it is the truth from your Lord, so that they may believe in it, and their hearts may be humble to it. Among this group were individuals like bin Asbat and others, as narrated in some accounts. Perhaps some of these individuals were contemplating how to convince people of his imamate and how they would accept it. Anxiety might have overwhelmed them from this perspective. It's possible that some of them expressed these concerns to someone, and it was misconstrued as disbelief in the imamate. We believe that the narration about a meeting in the town of Barkazalzal in Baghdad among some companions of Imam al-Reza and the attributed words of Yunus bin Abd al-Rahman expressing doubt about the actual imamate of Imam Al Jawad fall within this context. However, we have previously expressed skepticism about the authenticity of this narration, both in terms of its chain of transmission and its content. Imam Al Jawad during the time of Al-Mu'tazim al-Abbasi. With the death of Abdullah bin Harun, known as Al-Ma'mun al-Abbasi, in the year 218 AH, while on his way to Tarsus in northern Sham due to a fever, his brother Muhammad bin Harun, known as Al-Mu'tazim al-Abbasi, took over. This marked the beginning of a new phase of severity and cruelty towards the Shia of the Ahlul Bayt, and particularly towards Imam Al Jawad. Despite Al-Ma'mun's determination to secure his reign, evident in his removal of obstacles, including the killing of his brother Al-Amin and Imam al-Reza, when compared to his brother Al-Mu'tazim, Al-Ma'mun is considered to be the lesser of two evils. Al-Ma'mun was known for his intelligence, love for knowledge, and proficiency in debates and discussions. He evaluated individuals based on their scholarly standing and, in theory, acknowledged that the truth was with the family of Muhammad. However, in practice, he placed kingship and governance above everything else. While he theoretically admired the knowledge and capabilities of the Imams, his practical approach was limited to respect and admiration. As for Al-Mu'tazim, many negative qualities were attributed to him, so let us see what historians have said about him. We have mentioned in previous pages how Al-Mu'tazim despised attending scholarly gatherings and classes to the extent that he envied his colleague who had passed away and was relieved from attending such sessions. Even when the state continued the isolationist approach initiated by Al-Ma'mun, who was convinced of its merits, when Al-Mu'tazim came to power, dialogues were replaced by whips, imprisonment, and even death for those who disagreed with his beliefs. Ironically, he himself might not have comprehended the meanings behind those disagreements, especially as he was influenced by some rigid scholars, including Ahmad bin Abi Duad. While the period of Imam Al Jawad's life under Al-Ma'mun lasted for about 15 years, during which there was clear incitement against the Imam from the Abbasid household, and particularly from Al-Ma'mun's daughter, Al-Fazl, as evidenced by her conflicting relationship with her husband, Imam Al Jawad. Al-Ma'mun did not adopt a harsh stance against the Imam. However, we find that Al-Mu'tazim, who was raised in a tough and militaristic environment, and who surrounded himself with a special Turkic militia for his protection, couldn't tolerate the presence of Imam Al Jawad for even 2 years. When Al-Mu'tazim assumed the caliphate in 218 AH, he took the drastic step of poisoning the Imam in 220 AH in collaboration with his niece, Al-Fazl. Thus, the Imam was martyred in the prime of his life, at the peak of strength and youth, at the age of 25.